Buongiorno. Hello in Italian. So the next set of topics in biology, this is has to do with some general themes. Once again, in the science, lots of details, but some themes that run through biology, like streams running through a forest. One of my favorites is emergent properties. Emergent properties result from the arrangement and interaction of parts within a system. So you could say that this is the sum is greater, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's how that phrase goes. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So that when you put something together, um, it's more than just a collection of parts. They emerge as these properties, these new things emerge. They come out of the proper arrangement. So, for example, a functioning bicycle emerges only when all the necessary parts connect in the correct way. So, you can get a box. Fortunately, they assemble them now these days. But you can get a bicycle in a box that hasn't been assembled yet. Or think of this: how many of you have ever gone to IKEA and bought something, and it's just it's a collection of parts in a box, and you don't get a useful product until you put it together in the right way. So for a bicycle, you need two tires. That's what the bi means, bicycle, two wheels. And when you put it all together just the right way, you have something that you can use as transportation or exercise or both. That only the property of being able to use it as a vehicle only emerges when it's um, assembled in the proper way. The opposite of that, and this is one of the things we do a lot in science also, is reductionism. Reductionism means breaking it down and examining the parts. And why isn't this working? All right. So, for example, studying the molecular structure of DNA helps us understand the chemical basis of inheritance. So, by understanding how the molecule is put together and knowing that the molecule contains the genetic information, that helps us understand uh, how traits are passed down from one generation to another. So that was sent. Good. An understanding of biology balances reductionism with the study of emergent properties. So by understanding what the parts are and how they go together, we can understand the bigger picture. A system. I mentioned this in the previous slideshow, that systems biology conducts models for the dynamic behavior of whole biological systems. So dynamic, that's a word I want you to know. Dynamic. Dynamic means constantly changing. Constantly changing. And so biological systems are constantly changing, constantly adjusting, constantly adapting to changing conditions because conditions are always dynamic. An instance of this is how does a drug for blood pressure affect the other organs? Are there side effects? That'd be good to know. How does increasing carbon dioxide alter the biosphere? Now, there's a question, isn't there? Unbeknownst to many people, carbon dioxide is needed by plants for photosynthesis, and it's usually in short supply because there's not as much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere as people would have you believe. Um, our atmosphere is made up of about almost 80% nitrogen, almost 21% oxygen. See, that already adds up to over 100, doesn't it? And So I should say 70, almost 78% nitrogen, almost 21% oxygen. All right, so that adds up to 99. Then 1% other, and the percentage of the atmosphere that's due to carbon dioxide is 0.35%, 35 hundredths of 1%. And so it's actually in short supply for most plants. Every organism interacts with its environment. The study of the interaction of organisms with their environment is called ecology. I mentioned that word in the last show. With community ecology. Community ecology studies how, like the predator-prey, the interaction of organisms with their biological environment, a predator and its prey. It can be involved in non-living factors as well. You can talk about how plants do in a variety of different soil types, how they're interacting with the abiotic or non-living component of their environment. And so here's our example. A tree takes up water and minerals from the soil, carbon dioxide from the air, there you go. And the tree releases oxygen into the air. And well, it says roots help form soil a little bit. They help hold on to it. Worms actually make most of the soil. So in the process of photosynthesis, the tree takes up water and minerals from its root. There's just water for photosynthesis, minerals for nutrition. Carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and using the energy in sunlight rearranges the carbon dioxide and water to form sugar. And as a byproduct, the plants give off oxygen as a waste product. So here's a quick introduction to a general ecosystem. So here's sunlight coming in. Energy enters the ecosystems in the form of sunlight, and it bounces around the ecosystem for a little while. So it might get fixed, and what that means is from carbon dioxide and inorganic form to sugar, an organic form that can be used by other organisms, and the tree. The tree makes its own food. They're fixed into the sugar molecule that might get used by the tree. It might get used by the elephant. The tree takes up carbon dioxide, would take up water through its roots, give off oxygen as a byproduct. Animals eat the plant products, so the plants and other photosynthetic organisms are known as primary producers. The energy might be used by the elephant for raw materials or energy, the sugar. And we have the cycling of chemical nutrients, and what's not shown here is that some of the energy leaves as heat, and that's a very important part. If we look at the energy flow through an ecosystem, what we see is in almost all of them, and that means there are some notable exceptions, which we won't be talking about, things like hot thermal vents at the deep sea, places like that. In most ecosystems, energy comes in the form of sunlight, gets captured in the process of photosynthesis, and gets transferred around for a little while. Maybe it becomes part of the elephant. The elephant eats some of that, and the energy is used by the elephant to move around. Look, there's a zebra off in the distance. And eventually, this energy is going to leave as heat and be emitted, radiated back out to space. It takes a little while. So the energy comes in, bangs around the ecosystem, and then leaves as heat. Where the minerals, the molecules that we have, the actual molecules are cycled and recycled. So, for instance, water and minerals in the soil get picked up by the tree. They get turned into tree material. The leaves fall to the ground, get eaten by decomposers and scavengers, return the mineral to the soil, the ashes to ashes, dust to dust. You've heard that before. And so the molecules are all moving around, staying in the ecosystem most of the time, where the energy comes in and then leaves in the form of heat. So how cool is that? It is entirely possible that one of the molecules, one of the atoms in your body, let's go with one of the carbon atoms in your body. Carbon makes up the big molecules, carbohydrates, proteins, fats and nucleic acids like DNA, it's entirely probable that one of those carbon atoms in each and every one of our bodies once was in a dinosaur. How cool would that be? Think about that. The next question is, which dinosaur would you be? When I'm with the class face to face, I'd say, well, I wouldn't want to be a Tyrannosaurus Rex because then I couldn't do push-ups. Then I'd say, I don't know, I want to be a Velociraptor, so that I wasn't afraid of anybody else. And then I had a student one time who said, I want to be a Brontosaurus, and I was like, okay, why? And they said, because all you have to do is go over and eat it. And so now I want to be a Brontosaurus because I'm looking forward to that lasagna we're having later. I haven't started working on it yet. I went out for a jog before it got too hot in between making these videos. Now there's this. Humans have modified our environment. To some extent, that's true. Half the human-generated carbon dioxide stays in the atmosphere and contributes to global warming. Global warming is a major aspect of global climate change. All right, I have to throw out this. Okay, I know you've probably been indoctrinated your whole life to think that climate change is bad, but the bad news is, for that theory, is the Earth's climate has never been the same. It changes constantly. The entire history of the Earth is one of dramatic climate changes. Perhaps you've heard of an ice age. Remember, 15,000 years ago was the last glacial maximum, where there were glaciers a mile deep, a mile thick glaciers in places like Chicago and Detroit, where they are today. And the ocean was 400 feet lower. Not a couple of inches, 400 feet lower, because so much of the ice was locked up on the continental glaciers. And then the climate started changing, and the climate started warming, and the glaciers started melting and retreating. And they did that over the course of about 10,000 years, and a little, maybe 8. And the Earth did that all by itself. The last ice age, how did the climate warm up without our help? And the answer to that question is that the things that affect Earth's climate are mostly astronomical. Yeah, astronomical. For instance, the solar output is not the same. Sometimes the sun puts out a little more energy, sometimes a little bit less. The Earth's orbit is not the same. The tilt of the Earth on its axis wobbles a little bit, and the Earth's orbit around the sun is not exactly circular. So sometimes these things align to when the Earth is. It's a complicated story, but when these things align, sometimes it gets set up for warmer environments, warmer climates. Sometimes it gets set up for colder climates, and then we end up with an ice age. The time of the dinosaurs, between 65 and 280 million years ago, was where the climate was actually as stable as it's ever been. Then it started changing, and in the last 65 million years, we've gone through cyclical ice ages and non-ice ages. So, we're not going to be able to put rules on the sun to keep its output constant. We're not going to straighten out the Earth's orbit. We're not going to make the axis of the Earth that it spins on not wobble, and we wouldn't want to, because it's all these things and all these changes in the climate over all the eons have had a big effect on the Earth and its populations, not just human populations, but it has had an effect on human populations. And if you study anthropology, that last ice age had a big, huge impact on people. And when the ice age was ending, it had an even bigger part in human populations. So I'm not, like I said with that other picture, this is the Earth, this is our home, this is the only place we've got. We need to take care of it. We do not need to trash it. But there are other things that we can worry about. And if you want to worry about something that's real and happening and caused by human beings, and that maybe you can do something about, is habitat destruction. habitat destruction. But by tearing down habitats and putting in buildings and cities and highways, that destroys the places for plants and animals to live and destroys entire ecosystems. And that's happening on a widespread basis, like slash and burn farming practices in the Amazon. Um, if you were around Southeast Campus a couple years ago before they finished 360, you know, where the 360 road, the highway is right now, was a long strip of forest. You couldn't see the Home Depot shopping lot from the Southeast Campus. Well, then when they finished the road, and I like that road, I drive down it all the time. Well, sadly, they tore down that forest, and where do you suppose all the little creatures and plants and animals that live there? Now they don't have a home, and they died. So habitat destruction, that's something you can actually do something about. Recycling, that's another good thing you can do. Recycle particularly plastics. All right, so I mentioned some of this already, but life requires energy transfer and transformation. A fundamental characteristic of living things is their use of energy to carry out life's activity. Every organism needs a source of energy. Every organism needs a source of raw materials to replace, repair, and upkeep and grow their bodies. Living organisms transfer energy from one to the other. So, for instance, in my lasagna is going to be some tomato sauce, some meat, and some cheese. And that's food. That's where I'm going to get my energy from. The sauce came from the tomato plant, cheese from cow's milk, and the meat is going to be half ground beef and half venison. And so those organisms are going to transfer energy and materials from them to me and my wife in the form of lasagna. Another example, plants take the energy in sunlight and convert it to chemical energy in the chemical bonds of sugar. Talk about kinetic and potential energy later. And I already mentioned that energy flows through the ecosystem, usually entering as light, sunlight, and leaving as heat. But the molecules themselves, they stay in the ecosystem. Here's another example. Here is, this is me having lunch. Sunlight comes in. The producers, that's the primary producers, that's mostly plants and other photosynthetic organisms, convert the energy in sunlight with carbon dioxide and water in the process of photosynthesis, storing it in their bodies and their energy storage organs, whatever. This looks like a piece of fruit. That's not me. I know you saw my face the other day. This is my sister, the one I went to Arizona with. No, don't tell her I said that. And you saw a picture of her with our parents. And so the chemical energy is transferred from the plants to this little fella or whatever, male or female, that happens to be eating its lunch. And then now it's got that chemical energy, it can convert it to kinetic energy, the energy of motion. Whereas here's this I titled this picture Confidence. Confidence, because I know if I was that high up in a tree, I sure as heck wouldn't try this. But the animal's muscle cells convert the chemical energy in its food to the kinetic energy of motion. Here it is jumping from one tree to another. This particular being a monkey is warm-blooded, so it's giving off heat. Structure and function of living organisms is closely related. It's going to be this is another major theme in biology. Structure and function of living organisms are closely related. Here's their examples. For example, a leaf is thin and flat, maximizing the capture of light by chloroplasts. Okay, not all leaves are flat and thin. The pumpkin leaves, the pumpkin plant. I'll take a picture of my pumpkin plant. I have a whole bunch of them. I'll take a picture of my pumpkin patch and show you that those leaves are very big. They're very flat. Think of them, they're shaped like a solar panel, because that's what they are. They're more or less a solar panel. But some leaves are not. The leaves of a pine tree are like needles, pine needles. Those are leaves. A bird's wing adapted to flight. That's a good example. One of the things about flight is the lighter you are, the higher performance you can have. But the trade-off is the lighter you are, oftentimes the more brittle you are. So there's a trade-off between lightweight and strength. And the birds accomplish this by maximize this by, if you look inside a bird wing, you see it's got these little cross hatches. Guess what? If you look inside an airplane wing, you find the same structure. This gives strength and minimizes weight so that birds and the airplanes can fly. My favorite example of structure and function is the bicycle tire. Think about a bicycle tire. It's round and shaped like a disc, right? Round and flat. How well would a bicycle tire work if it was shaped like a square instead of a circle? It could still be thin and flat, but shaped like a square instead. Well, it sure as heck wouldn't roll very well, would it? So structure and function. The shape of the bicycle wheel, being a flat disc, lends it to its function, which is to roll along the surface of the earth. So, all right, there's that. We're going to come back in the next video and talk about different cell types in our living world. So I said hello, buongiorno in Italian. So I guess I'll say goodbye in Italian. Arrivederci.